This morning, Texas's new Secretary of State in his first TV interview. John Scott on one thing he says his office will now start doing after elections. State Rep Matt Krause making national news, asking school districts whether they have certain books on race and sexuality. We'll ask him why he wants to know. Paid family leave. Democrats killed it in their Build Back Better plan. Congressman Colin Allred, though, says it's not gone for good. And Austin firefighters are campaigning against Austin police officers in Tuesday's election. Firefighters are with us explaining why they're making this rare move.
Inside Texas Politics with Jason Whiteley starts now.
Good Sunday morning to our viewers across the state. Let's start this morning with some of the political headlines that we are watching. Governor Abbott signed the new redistricting maps into law, but there is not a lot of confidence that the primary elections will happen in March. Eric Holder, the former Attorney General under President Obama, is behind the Democrats' latest lawsuit. He's arguing that Texas's new maps violate the Federal Voting Rights Act. The Lincoln Project is filing an ethics complaint against Governor Abbott. It wants to know why the governor was allowed to do an interview with a conservative news website at UT's football stadium in Austin. Just a few weeks ago, the Lincoln Project says that UT would not even let it run a paid TV commercial that was critical of Abbott, reportedly because the university has a policy against political ads. And here is an odd combination. A gun rights group is now supporting abortion providers. This nonprofit is called the Firearms Policy Coalition. It agrees with abortion providers that it's a bad idea to let private citizens enforce the new anti-abortion law in the state. The gun rights group worries that laws could also be passed using that same mechanism to limit the Second Amendment. But let's start with that letter going out to Texas school districts. A state lawmaker wants to know whether public schools have specific books on campus about race and sexuality. He's asking about 800 different titles, but why does he want to know, and what if they do? Two questions that we had for State Representative Matt Krause. He is a Republican from Fort Worth who chairs the House's General Investigating Committee. Mr. Chairman, it's good to see you again. Let's start with the letter that was sent out to school districts about the books. Did every school district in the state get this letter, or just certain ones?
Well, as the chairman of General Investigating, anytime there's a potential or pending investigation, we don't comment on it. And that's been our reply to many folks who have asked us about that. So many people have now seen the letter, but we're not going to comment on it one way or the other while we gather the information.
Like you said, a lot of people have seen the letter. If a school district has these books, though, what do you intend to do?
Well, again, we sent out that letter as an inquiry. We're going to see what those districts respond with. And again, any more than that, we can't comment on at this point.
And Mr. Chairman, is there any obligation that the districts have to actually respond to that letter?
We would hope everybody would act in good faith to gather this information that we think is important. And so, yeah, I do think that there's a need to give us that information. But again, we'll see what each individual school district will do.
And as far as just the legalities around this, does the legislature, is there anything in the law that says the legislature can remove books from a certain district?
Yeah, I'm not sure one way or the other on that. There's been instances we know around the state where parents have gotten involved and been very upset and frustrated with certain materials that have been in some schools, and they've gotten them removed. And so I think parental involvement at the local level is always very important, and that won't change regardless of what happens here.
What happens if a school district does not provide a response to your letter?
Well, that's something we will address when the time comes. But again, to say anything more, we just don't comment on that.
And for the school districts and our viewers and Texans across the state, when might this investigation wrap up? Might they get more clarity on this?
Well, I think it's important to recognize that this wasn't an investigation, it was an inquiry. That's the first step of fact gathering for the committee. So no investigation has been launched, but all of that, the timeline and however that goes, that all depends on numerous factors. But again, we don't comment on those particulars as we go throughout the process. That's been the standard procedure for the committee for a long time, and we're going to continue to follow that.
Your name will be on the ballot in the March primary for the Republicans, obviously. You've announced you're running for Texas Attorney General. You're one of four right now, but what will it take to defeat an incumbent who's so popular among the base?
Unfortunately, the incumbent has made some decisions, made some poor judgments, and compromised himself that really kind of puts a cloud over the office. And I think as more individuals see that and understand the importance of what that could look like, especially the FBI investigation, where you could have the sitting attorney general under indictment by the FBI come next November, and the prospects of what that could do to the Republican ticket and the ability to make sure that we have a Republican attorney general in office January of 2023. I think that's the importance that's really going to come through for folks. And I think that's when they're going to start looking for other alternatives. We're that faithful conservative fighter that you can trust, that's a proven conservative that voters can trust. And then I think our message will resonate with them as well.
Mr. Chairman, we appreciate the time.
It's always good to be with you, Jason. Thanks for everything.
Tomorrow morning in Washington, D.C., Texas will defend its new anti-abortion law before the U.S. Supreme Court. Justices will hear arguments from both sides. This is the Texas law that outlaws abortions after a fetal heartbeat is detected, usually about 6 weeks along in a pregnancy. Remember, the state does not enforce this one. Instead, anyone can sue abortion providers over it. Ross Ramsey is among those watching this case. He's the co-founder and executive editor of the Texas Tribune in Austin. Good morning to you, Ross.
Good morning, Jason. How are you?
Doing well here. Mississippi also has that high-profile anti-abortion case at the Supreme Court. Is there any significance of Texas going first?
Well, I think the court wanted to hear Texas first because the administration was pressing to hear it. There are some immediate questions like, are you going to leave this law in effect while you're deciding? But they might well hear the Mississippi case before they rule on the Texas case. They could rule on all of these cases together. We're just first in the hearing schedule.
Governor Abbott signed those 4 redistricting maps into law, and it seems like Democrats are obviously continuing in the courts. How likely is it that we'll see the primaries happen in March?
I think it's 50-50 now. They passed a law during the session that puts the primaries right where they are. They kind of had a rescheduling thing. And if the courts don't redraw the maps or say they're partly illegal, we should go ahead on March 1st. If they do, we don't.
We'll see what happens. Ross, back to you in a moment. Thank you. Coming up, the newest state official everyone is talking about, but no other station is talking to. The new Secretary of State John Scott in his first TV interview. And paid family leave among the priorities cut out of the Build Back Better plan. Democratic Congressman Colin Allred, though, says it's not gone for good. We'll talk to him when Inside Texas Politics returns. Now to the newest state official everyone is talking about, but no other station is talking to. The new Secretary of State, his name is John Scott, an attorney from Fort Worth, and maybe you've seen him in the headlines. He briefly worked for the Trump campaign, protesting the outcome of the November election last year. Now, though, as Secretary of State, Scott oversees Texas elections, among other things. We spoke to him in his first TV interview hours after he began the job last Thursday. Mr. Secretary, congratulations on the new position. We have to start with the headlines, though, about your appointment that you briefly worked just for a few days for the Trump campaign in Pennsylvania. And I want to ask you about that. Considering your work with President Trump, why should all Texans trust you to fairly run the elections in this state?
Well, Jason, I think those that know me trust me because as a lawyer, I really operate based on evidence. And I think irrespective of my role in any lawsuit, I think at the core, at bottom, is an analysis based on making decisions based upon the evidence. And I think when we do that, it allows for a transparency and for anyone to look at it and most likely agree with what decisions we make. And I think that's one of the things that I bring to this office or continue to bring to this office. I think that's why.
I do want to ask you, though, looking back now, almost a year later, do you think that Donald Trump won the last election or lost the last election based on the evidence that's out there?
Well, I think we're sitting here October 28th of 2021. President Biden is our president, has been for coming up on a year. I mean, it's almost a year since the election. And so there's no question that Joseph Biden is the president and won the election.
Let's talk about your vision for the office. Elections, of course, is only one thing that you oversee in your new role there. But what are your priorities for this new position?
Well, I would love to continue the long history the state and Governor Abbott has had in attracting businesses to Texas. He has attracted and made Texas still #1 destination for businesses, new businesses. And I want to expand also on our relationships we have with Mexico. Visiting with the governors of Nuevo León, Coahuila, with Chihuahua, Guanajuato, the different governors down there. Hopefully we'll get to visit with President Obrador and visit with them as well. But I think they're a key trading partner with the state. And in doing so, I think we help. I hope our goal is, and I think it is, to fix a little bit of the economies down on the border that have suffered probably greater than anybody through COVID, because in addition to that, they've suffered through a lot of what we see on TV with the security issues. It's been devastating to those communities.
We do have several elections coming up, one just in a few days from now. And then we have the primaries whenever those happen in the spring. And then we have next year's elections as well. Do you see any fundamental change at all that you might try to enact or want to see happen in our elections?
So I don't think anything new is going to happen on the November 2nd constitutional elections. What we would like to do is finish the forensic audit that we've got as fast as possible. And so we're going to be asking for some more resources from the state in order to hire more people to get that effectuated.
And what would that money be used for?
For creating a forensic audit division. Part of some of the new legislation that's come out will coincide with some of the things we're doing now, and trying to get up to speed as much as possible on where we are on our audit on phase 1 and then phase 2.
Will the Secretary of State's office be setting up a permanent forensic audit department inside?
Yes, sir.
And was it, forgive me for my not knowing this, but was that part of the law, or is that something that you hope to just implement?
So it's ultimately going to be part of SB1 is the recurring audits. And so as part and parcel of that, we might as well start getting the organization or the Secretary of State's office organized in such a way that allows that process to grow. And again, you want to have it in place by the time that SB1 becomes enacted. And I think it goes into force on December 2nd.
When some people saw your appointment, they wondered, are you temporary, or do you plan to be around through the 2023 legislative session when you might have to go before the Senate for confirmation? Well, what do you tell those folks? How long do you want to be in this position?
Well, I want to be here the rest of today, and I'll take care of tomorrow. But I'm just going to work as the Secretary of State every day. Whatever happens then, it happens. If you look at the long history of this office, it's not an office people are in for a lifetime, right? And I think that brings change brings a lot of good new ideas, new blood, new energy, new excitement, and hopefully I can do that for the place here. But most importantly, hopefully I bring honor to the place. That's the real goal.
Mr. Secretary, thank you for the time. Congratulations again.
Thank you very much, Jason. Have a great weekend.
Now to the nation's capital, where paid family leave is among the Democratic priorities that did not survive in their Build Back Better plan. It's an issue that Congressman Colin Allred in Dallas has long championed. What remains in the plan, though? And more importantly, will income taxes go up for Allred's constituents in North Dallas to pay for it all? Two of our questions for the Dallas Democrat. Congressman Allred, thank you again for the time. Senator Joe Manchin from West Virginia says no on paid family leave. That's something you have pushed for very vocally for months and months. Is that a mistake?
Yeah. Well, Jason, as you probably know, I was the first member of Congress ever to take paternity leave. That's something that I believe strongly in, that every American should have access to paid leave, just like I did. But I think what we've established in this process is that the majority of the American people support paid family leave, that we have a lot of businesses that support us having a national paid family leave policy. We've set a baseline that I think is going to make it easier for us to take this fight to the next piece of legislation. Because this bill, as important as it is, it's not going to be the last piece of legislation we pass here.
Congressman, the president came out on Thursday and outlined his compromised plan, the Build Back Better plan. Is this pared down version with all it includes, and it does not include paid family leave, is this something you can live with?
Absolutely. This is a historic investment in American families. And as somebody who was born and raised in Dallas by a single mom who was teaching in DISD, this bill would have made a huge difference in our lives, from extending the child tax credit. You know, the North Texas Food Bank has told me they can track when the child tax credit hits bank accounts, the demand for their supplies goes down and then it goes back up in the weeks afterwards. You know, to universal pre-K, which is one of the best investments that we make in terms of our young people. We get $7 back for every dollar we invest in early childhood education, to capping the cost of childcare. I mean, these are enormously important things that have been priorities for decades that are in this piece of legislation. So yes, it's a really good bill. It also has a lot to do with climate. That's going to help us in terms of climate. And of course, the infrastructure side is something we desperately need in North Texas as well.
Congressman, the president said and reiterated multiple times that taxes will not go up on anyone making less than $400,000 in order to pay for this thing. But that's a good chunk of your district. And I'm curious, are families that make $400,000, are they not paying their fair share?
Well, what we're seeing is that we're likely going to have a different approach in terms of the revenue. There will be different avenues to try and do that, from a corporate minimum tax, because we've had so many of our most profitable corporations who have paid zero in federal income tax over the years, to try and make sure that they're paying at least a minimum of 15% to contribute to the society that has made their success so possible. And so the revenue stuff is still going to be worked out, but it's going to be based on fairness, and it's going to be based on what's best for the American people. And the investments that we make will bring more back in terms of economic output than whatever we put in.
We'll be watching to see how that plays out. Congressman Allred, we appreciate the time as always.
Thank you so much.
48 hours from the election day here in Texas, mainly issues are on the ballot, and one we are watching is Proposition A in Austin. If passed, it would mandate that Austin spend millions more to hire more police officers. But firefighters are campaigning against this idea. Bob Nix, the president of the Austin Firefighters Association, tells us why.
Well, you have to work within the political process. And, we're 9% down. Police are 12% down. EMS is 13% vacancy rates. We all have vacancy rates that are too high. So for one entity to basically fleece the others to get what they want or get what they think they need is just not appropriate. We need to work together within the budget matrix and get it together. And this has been divisive in a way I wish it never was. Police and fire associations have always been very close. And I want to get back to that closeness.
Coming up as of this weekend, we are now 1 year away from the midterm elections. Will Texas Democrats give us anything to discuss? We'll begin right there next on the Roundtable. Time now for Reporters Roundtable to put the headlines in perspective. Ross Ramsey is back with us from the Texas Tribune in Austin. Bud Kennedy is here each week from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, and Bernadine Steptoe is a political producer at WFAA in Dallas. Ross, will start with you. We are a year away from the midterm elections. We've been talking about Republican races forever on this program, and in the Texas Tribune as well, too. Are Democrats going to give us something to discuss?
Well, first you have to have some Democrats to discuss it. They don't have a gubernatorial candidate in the race yet. As of November 1st, we're only 4 months away from the primary, so they need to get going. They've got candidates for lieutenant governor and AG, but until you've got somebody leading the ticket and the issues that person describes, you don't really have a thing to talk about.
And Bud, they do need to get going. Why haven't they done something? Why hasn't Beto made some announcement either way, or somebody else hopped in?
We're still waiting. I looked at the calendar. When Wendy Davis ran, she announced in October. Chris Bell announced in October. Lupe Valdez didn't announce till December. You kind of have to get going, but we're all waiting for the benefit in the living room.
Indeed we are, Bernadine. What do you expect to happen? I mean, are we going to talk about Democrats? Will they be a player in the midterms?
I think they will, because I think that eventually they're going to have to do something. They just can't sit out an election, and they must have a primary candidate. So I think that they're sitting back and trying to come up with a candidate who can be a viable candidate and campaign against Governor Abbott, because that's the seat that we're waiting on.
Indeed, the top of the ticket. Let's shift back to the beginning of the program. Bud, we had Matt Krause on, state rep from Fort Worth. He, of course, is asking school districts about books. State Rep James White from East Texas, he's running for Agriculture Commissioner. Krause is running for Attorney General. And White is asking whether anyone has to recognize same-sex marriage. Are these two just trying to get headlines, or is there something more in this?
It's really puzzling with James White, because he's just asking whether normal Texans have to recognize same-sex marriage or not. And, that's something the government has to recognize, but nobody personally has to recognize it. It's pretty obvious. Both of these are challengers to incumbents, and these are pretty Trumpy incumbents in Sid Miller and Ken Paxton. So, they're trying to splinter off some faith and values voters for their challenge.
Bernadine, are these moves designed to attract attention?
Yes, and it's working, because we would not have talked about Krause. Krause wasn't even on our radar at that point, and especially James White. So it is working. Now, how long they're going to have to come up with these shock efforts, we'll see, but it's working, and they'll continue doing it.
It does sound like it's working. Ross, does any of this surprise you? And secondly, I mean, here we are in the end of October, beginning of November. We still have several months to go. They'll have to do something else, I guess, too, right?
Yeah.
Well, sure. But, politics is marketing, and they're trying to get their names known. They're trying to get their ideas known. They want to get in front of as many people as they can. They need to do it early to try to raise money from donors. That money can be used later to get voters. I think they're right on time, and this is to be expected.
But in the coming months, they are right on time, perhaps in the coming months, though, should we expect more?
Well, they'll all need to get their name out there. When you're challenging an incumbent, you have to get statewide publicity fast. That's tough in the state of Texas.
Bernadine, final word this morning.
And we're going to see it from other candidates in other races, because if they see that it's working here, they're going to try it as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. Matt Krause, of course, making national news with his attention on the books. Thank you guys very much. We appreciate it. Thank you for watching as well. We're back again next Sunday to take you inside Texas politics. Hope you can join us then. Happy Halloween and happy first start of November as well. Take care.